Welcome to the Regen Brands podcast. This is a place for brands, retailers, investors, and other food system stakeholders to learn about the consumer brands supporting regenerative agriculture and how they're changing the world. This is your host, Kyle, joined by my co-host, AC, who's going to take us into the episode.
On this episode, we are joined by Will and Jenni Harris from White Oak Pastures, which may very well be the original and very first regenerative brand. White Oak Pastures is a 160-year-old zero-waste regenerative farm that raises 10 species of animals living in symbiotic relationships with each other and the land. Starting in 1995, the farm transitioned away from industrial agriculture techniques and began operating their farm as a living ecosystem. As a brand, White Oak has been a pioneer in American grass-fed beef production, selling both Publix and Whole Foods their very first domestic supplied grass-fed beef over a decade ago. Today, White Oak operates a myriad of businesses at their home ranch in Bluffton, Georgia, with a team of 160 people, and their products are sought out by customers in 48 of the 50 states. In this episode, Will shares his journey from industrial cattleman to regenerative innovator. Jenni details how the business has shifted from grocery to e-commerce, and both of our guests share their story with their trademark transparency, humility, and Southern charm. Will and Jenni highlight the need for consumer-driven change in agriculture. Jenni shares how being on the Joe Rogan Experience has affected their business, and Will takes us behind the scenes of producing his book, A Bold Return to Giving a Damn. We were honored to have them join us and really enjoyed the conversation. We hope you do too. Let's dive in. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Regen Brands podcast. Very excited today to have what may be the original, the first Regen brand of all time. Maybe. I think it is. But we have Will and Jenni Harris from White Oak Pastures joining us. So welcome, y'all. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, we're super excited. Sorry to interrupt already, man. Off to a rough start. But, you know, when I first started learning about regenerative agriculture in 2020, you know, White Oak Pastures was this like beacon of hope as an operation that was doing it right. So I'm really truly personally thrilled to have you two both on the podcast today to learn about your operation and to share your story with our audience. For those who, if anybody's listening to this podcast, I'd be shocked if you didn't know who White Oak Pastures was. But for our listeners who might not know, give us a quick lay of the land. What sort of products do you produce and where can people buy White Oak Pastures today?
So White Oak Pastures is our family farm in Bluffton, Georgia. Started by my great-grandfather and industrialized by my dad post-World War II and deindustrialized by me and my daughter Jenni now. So we currently raise cows, hogs, sheep, goats, rabbits, poultry, organic vegetables, honey. We got a store, we got a restaurant, we got lodging. We have a lot of fun. We got about 170 employees, largest private employer in the county.
Yeah. Quite a few things going on over there. Just a couple.
A lot of moving parts.
A lot of moving animals too.
Yeah. And where can folks find your products today? I know y'all used to be really heavy grocery. Now you're doing more D2C. What's that look like today?
Yeah, so half of our volume goes through our website, our e-commerce store, whiteoakpastures.com. The other half is still in grocery. Last year was the first year that we kind of balanced out with that 50-50 model, B2B, B2C. The grocery stores that we work with are grocery stores that we've been with for, maybe 2 decades now. Publix supermarket, Kroger, and the newest one, which is probably maybe 6 years old, is Four Seasons Produce, which serves Mom's Organics markets in the Northeast. So huge fans. There are a few independent markets, too many to name, but we try to do a good job on our social media calling everybody out.
Love it. Yeah, I used to live in Florida, and I miss the ease of just going into Publix and grabbing the 1 pound beef packs. But before we get too deep into conversation, Kyle and I have a ton of questions just about what's going on with the business right now. We'd like to hear maybe 2 origin stories. Will, you already mentioned kind of this transition from conventional or industrial agriculture to regenerative, and then also when did the brand itself, was inseminated? So we'd love to have y'all just share both of those with our audience.
So this farm is 160 or 70 years old, and it had always been called White Oak Pastures, White Oak Farm. And White Oak, nobody, if you're not from Bluffton, Georgia, knows what a White Oak is, but White Oak is the local colloquial name for white oak. So when I was getting the meat business started, I was going to set it up as away from the farm as a separate subchapter S. So I went to see the lady who builds websites. This is back before websites were that common in rural South Georgia. And it was the Baptist preacher's wife in her mobile home. And I went, and she finally got enough children put to bed that we could get to work on the kitchen table. And she said, "Okay, so what are we going to call it?" With a little laptop. I said, White Oak Pastures. She said, "How you spell Tenac?" I said, "Well, we spell it Tenac. Some people spell it Tenak. Let's go with Tenac." She said, "Well, what's a Tenac oak?" I said, "It's a white oak." She said, "Well, why don't you call it White Oak Pastures?" I said, because it's been called White Oak Pastures for about 150 years. She said, "Do you want to spend the rest of your life spelling Tenac?" White Oak Pastures.
Done deal.
So that's how we got the name. I was a very industrial cattleman. I got disillusioned with that management style after 20 years, and I started moving away from it very rapidly, intentionally, and this is where we wound up.
Well, can I ask why you got disenfranchised with the industrial version of raising cattle?
Yeah, the excesses of it bothered me. It's full of excesses, and I was an excessive person over and above the average. So, when if it said give them 2 cc's, I gave them 4 cc's, and if it said put out a pint to the acre, I put out a quart to the acre. So I think I probably saw the unintended consequences of those technologies better than people who were playing by the rules, and I didn't like it. So I started moving away from it, and this is where we wound up.
Then you became excessively regenerative and focused on soil to an excessive degree.
Nobody's ever said that before, but that's exactly what happened.
I love it.
Yeah.
He's excessive in every direction. He doesn't know where to start a story or end a story, or it went from being very linear to being very cyclical, very circular. And so there is no beginning and there is no end. So depending on what mood he's in, depends on what stories you're going to get for the day. So.
We like that. Where did you turn initially to do something different? Was it complete trial and error? Did you read a book? Did you call somebody? Like, what did you do initially?
I graduated from the University of Georgia, so reading a book was not an option. And sadly, when I started making my transition, I assumed I was the only person on the planet that was making that transition. Later on, I learned that Gabe Brown in North Dakota was doing the same thing the same day, and others. We just didn't know each other. And, we didn't have cell phones. We didn't have computer service out here in the country. It was, if you didn't read it in the paper, you just about didn't know about it. So I transitioned very independently, and a lot of trial and error, and a lot of trying to. My family had been on this farm for a long time, and most of those legends were lost. But just trying things that I thought I understood that had been done previously, and finally figuring it out.
And what was it that you figured out, or are continuing to figure out? Was it the rotational grazing aspect? Was it more time on pasture? Like, what did you start to learn, and what did you see that kind of made you feel like you were moving in the right direction?
Yeah.
Well, all of the above. I mean, so much of what I was doing was wrong. Jenni mentioned earlier that the difference in linear and cyclical. Modern agriculture, post-agriculture since World War II, has been very linear. And then we could talk about that all day long. And agriculture as a in nature is very cyclical. We talk about the cycles of nature all the time. The water cycle from the rain, the energy cycle from the sun, the microbial cycle, the changing of the seasons, the energy, everything is so cyclical. And we had made it linear, my dad and me and the industry. And I just moved away from that and continued. And we're still moving away from it. 25 years later, we don't have it all figured out. We're still figuring it out and learning every day still.
Mm-hmm. When was the inflection point to bring in the other species? So it sounds like you were cattle. It kind of just started with cattle, and then now you're doing, I forget how many you just listed, but it sounded like at least 5.
Yeah, I love cattle then. I loved them now. I love them now. I never intended to bring anything else in, but back on that linear, I aspired to have a monoculture of Tifton 85 Bermuda grass in my pastures. Because it is a great recipient of a nitrogen fertilizer. You can absorb copious quantities of nitrogen fertilizer and turn it into grazing for cattle. Mm-hmm. So if you were in my pasture and you weren't Tifton 85 Bermuda grass, I sprayed you with a herbicide or an insecticide or a fungicide.
Wow.
And then the cattle did great on it. But then when I gave up all those sides, I had other stuff growing in the pasture that the cattle didn't like. And I didn't use herbicide, so I had to get rid of it. So I went to other species in order to do that.
And I begged for sheep. I'll just interject that in 2000, I was a sophomore in high school, so that would have been like 2003. There was nothing cuter. I was not in love with cattle. That was what he loved, and I loved them and still love them, but I wanted something different. So I begged for sheep when I was in high school, and he heard that sheep preferentially graze what cattle leave behind. Cattle preferentially graze what sheep don't prefer. So he gave in to me, and we got some sheep, and then that was. Again, the early 2000s, we introduced hogs in about 2012 because my brother-in-law, John, loved hogs. He wanted hogs. Got some goats, poultry, and now it looks a lot like Noah's Ark.
Well, it sounds like the impetus was really to try to find different types of lawn mowing animals, right? You've got your primary that's going to get most of the grass, and you've got a sheep that's going to get rid of some other stuff. At what point did it become... hey, we want to start a different enterprise, and there was a commercial upside to bringing in maybe poultry or hogs, or was it always just focused on, what's going to be best for the land?
Yeah, it's always been for what's best for the land, what the land needed. But you are right that having these other species to provide other meat is very desirable for our customer base. And we don't make any money in the poultry business. The poultry business is not profitable for us, but we want to have poultry because people that buy our beef and pork and lamb want chicken and turkey and duck sometimes. So it all is, make no mistake, it's driven by what the cycles of nature and what's called for in the pastures. But we do have to be profitable. We don't have any other source of income except what we sell to people.
Is the challenges in poultry feed costs, labor costs, mortality rate? Like what makes poultry so hard?
When we industrialized meat production, we took more cost out of poultry than we did out of the other species.
Right.
I was raised, we weren't church people, but I was raised understanding that the preacher came to eat dinner with you on Sunday, you fried a chicken. people today think that's because it's the cheapest way to feed the preacher, but that's not. It was the best thing you could feed the preacher. I went to this is detracting and telling story. I went to a meeting in Boulder, Colorado. I just spent $1 million building the poultry plant, and I went to a meeting in Boulder, and we were losing our ass in the poultry business. And I was some folks carried me out to supper, and we were eating in the Boulder Rama Hotel, and there was a menu on the wall. I still got a picture of it from like 1890 or something. And it said, beef plate, 89 cents. Pork plate, 99 cents. Poultry plate, $1.30. So it was just,
wow.
And when I saw it, I said, oh, shit, that's the problem right there. Because when we industrialized poultry, we took way more cost out of it than we did out of pork, and then and beef.
And my dad, you should know, is a swing for the fence kind of guy. So instead of just going into the poultry business, he built a own farm USDA inspected processing plant, which was no simple or cheap venture. And in doing so, we overbuilt our capacity to process for a market that did not exist. There weren't enough people that could afford pastured poultry at the level that we could raise and slaughter them, which meant that, we talk a lot about the three legs on the stool. There's any good stool that's worth sitting on has at least three legs that are the same length. And those stools on a production food system like we have are production, processing, and sales. And so for us, with regard to poultry, we had production and processing, but the third leg of the stool, sales, was much shorter than the other two. So our nice stool was not balanced. It toppled over, and it ultimately was a very hard business for us to make work.
Our beef probably costs 25% more than industrial beef. I don't know if that's close. Pork is similar. Our break-even cost raising poultry is probably $5 and something a pound. Am I right?
A high five.
High five. And that's way over twice as much, probably 3 times as much as industrial chicken. And consumers just push back on that, and I get it. I don't blame them. And,
yeah, it makes sense. If you're 2x higher than the conventional cost just to break even, who's going to be willing to pay 3x and have you, maintain that same level of margin? So difficult business, but I do think it's a good idea, especially because chicken is so widely consumed. It could be an entry point for somebody into the White Oak ecosystem, right? Where they then learn about your practices and say, hey, now I want to buy pork, beef, whatever else. And Will, to your point earlier, those who are already buying the beef or the pork or other animals are going to want chicken eventually. So keeps them in the ecosystem, which makes sense.
What's up, y'all? Quick interruption to this episode to humbly ask for your support. It's crazy to think that Kyle and I started this podcast 3 years ago. We're so honored to host these conversations. We're honored to have you as a part of our community, as a listener, as a viewer. We're so proud of the stories that we've been able to tell and the impact that this platform has had. And to date, we've done it all self-funded. We haven't asked for any monetary support. We haven't put any of our content behind a paywall. We haven't tried to sell anybody anything. But today that changes. We need your support to move forward with this podcast. We need your support to build this new nonprofit that we've created. But here's the good news. We got some amazing incentives and some amazing perks if you do decide to make a donation, which all donations are tax deductible because we are a 501c3. But let's talk about the fun stuff. So if you choose to support us, any donation, any amount, you will be invited to our community call, which is happening very, very soon in just a couple weeks to celebrate our 100th episode and to celebrate all the fun we've had on the show, all the amazing stories we've gotten to tell, all the amazing insights we've unlocked, and most importantly, the amazing community that includes you that we've built since hosting this show. Secondly, if you donate at least $100 one time, you'll be entered to win a Grill Master box from Force of Nature Meats. Pretty epic $300 value regenerative meat box. If you donate at least $100, you'll be entered to win the Grill Master box from Force of Nature. And last but certainly not least, if you make a recurring monthly donation of at least $25, you'll be entered into a raffle giveaway of a $1,000 regenerative product prize pack from some of your favorite regenerative brands. So we'd love to have your support. We greatly appreciate you being a listener. If you do donate, if you can donate, please visit our website, our donation page at donate.regen-brands/podcast. That's donate.regen-brands/podcast. We greatly appreciate you being a part of our community. We would super appreciate the support via donation. Thank you so much. Thanks for listening. Thanks for caring. Hope you're thriving out there in the world.
I want to go back to the first White Oak branded sale. Was what and happened because a buyer came to you all realized you were differentiated and kind of needed a differentiated market. Like what was that? What was that like?
So when I first started moving away from the industrial model, which is truckloads of calves shipped to the far west for confinement feeding, which is what I did for a long time. I was changing things, and I still didn't know how to grass finish cattle. That's an art. And I was a pretty good cow guy, but I relied on corn to put weight on them. So I was selling grass-fed beef, and it just wasn't very good. I mean, I just couldn't. It just wasn't very good. But, tough and not fat. And so I was grinding up the whole cow and selling grass-fed ground beef. And it was really good ground beef. I mean, we were grinding fillets and tenderloins and the whole thing. It was good. We offered it for sale, and my timing was so lucky on that deal. Not skilled, not smart, just lucky. But we started doing that about the time people were starting to talk about grass-fed beef. And it was a conversation, but nobody had any much. So we sold Whole Foods Market.
Publix was first.
Publix first. We sold Publix Supermarket the first pound of American grass-fed beef that they marketed as American grass-fed beef. And Whole Foods followed, and then the others. And it was just so lucky. I wish I could say, I saw that coming and got ahead of it. That's not what happened.
When was that, Will? Like 2010? 2002. Okay, so it was way late. Wow. Yeah. Y'all were definitely early and on time on that one.
Another mistake I made is, I probably had 600-700 mama cows. And when I converted. Which meant I somehow thought I could sell a tremendous amount of grass-fed beef when the market wasn't there. It never occurred to me to downsize. All my life it's been more. So it never crossed my mind until way after the fact. I said, shit, I should have cut back, but I didn't.
Y'all are so interested in the brand story. And I remember the first brochures that Dad had made up about grass-fed beef. And it was all the claims, omega-6s and omega-3s and linoleic acids and aminos, it was really, really health focused on grass-fed beef, the benefits of grass-fed beef, which is logical. I mean, everybody was talking about grass-fed beef, not about White Oak Pastures. And so he went to a food show in, the early 2000s, and he got on an elevator with a foreign man and, long elevator ride, probably very awkward. Everybody's had those elevator rides. And so the guy got a brochure from Dad and said, do you want some unsolicited advice? And, Dad said, well, we got, 20 floors left. I reckon I'm going to get it. He said, you're working so hard to sell grass-fed beef. People don't want grass-fed beef. They want to know you. They want to know the farmer. You need to help them focus on White Oak Pastures. And I think from that day on, it was less about grass-fed beef and more about a vertically integrated food system, that goes back to the traditional methods of feeding your community.
I've forgotten all about that. I do remember now. And he actually had the brochure in his pocket.
Oh.
We'd been at a food show.
Wow.
And we got on and we were going up, and he reached in his pocket and got my brochure out and said what she said. Basically what he was saying is, this is not good, and let me tell you what's wrong with it. And what she said is right. The other thing he said is, and you're making all these claims you know nothing about. And what I know about linolenic acid? Nothing. So at that point, at my request, they tore our website apart and took out everything in it. If it wasn't about animal welfare, which we're good at.
Yeah.
If it wasn't about land management, which we're good at. And if it wasn't about this local rural economy, which we're good at. If it wasn't about those three things, it had to come out of there. I don't care how true it is. It's not for me to say. I have no credibility.
I love that authentic approach. And I also want to thank thus far the two strangers who have given you guys great advice in these stories, you know, the Baptist wife and the stranger in the elevator. Fantastic. I need to run into more of these strangers in my own life. That'd be helpful.
Yeah.
You got to be humble. You know, I know I don't know shit about these things. And when I never had an original idea in my life, you know, but I'll listen.
That's great advice. Jenni, you mentioned the vertical food system, and you know that's what we need, right? And I'm curious, you know, it sounds like poultry processing is already taking place. What other processing have you all built into your system at White Oak?
Yep. So on the meat side of things, we slaughter cattle, goats, sheep, hogs, and seasonally some poultry. So that's on the protein side of it. We also have a commissary kitchen where we make our own broths, jerkies, pickled okra. We grow some figs and strawberries and things that we turn into jellies and jams. So that's our value addition kitchen. We also have a general store here in town that we sell, staples in addition to all the things we raise and produce and cook. We've got a restaurant where we cook 21 meals a week, 3 meals a day, 7 days a week. We've got cabins or townhouses where people can come and spend the night, grow some certified organic vegetables, harvest some really, really good honey from our orchard. And then we make our own pet treats out of hides and esophaguses and tracheas and things that people don't want to eat. We dehydrate them for pets. We make our own leather belts and bags out of regenerative cattle hides. And then we make some skincare products. I'm actually 62. I know I only look 38. I'm really 38 and I look 48, but this is not a plug for our tallow because I'm not aging backwards, I promise. Me and Betty were talking about how gray we were on this call. There's nothing that helps you focus on how old you look than a podcast. But anyway, so we make our own tallow skincare products. We make candles and soaps, large soaps, tallow soaps, hand soaps, moisturizers, the whole nine.
It really is incredible, and it feels like every possible thing you could be making on your land you are, which is fantastic. And the vertical integration piece, to me, it just feels really interesting because that feels really hard to do for any brand who's focusing on just one vertical, let alone the number of verticals you all have in your system. So when did it become apparent that you wanted to bring all of that processing in-house, and why was that so important to White Oak?
So there was no Harris that aspired to have a skincare brand. It was dealing with a byproduct. It's like when we complicated or, made our system more complex, braiding layers and layers on top, it was born out of a problem. Like for tallow skincare, one of the things we didn't mention is that our plant produces, maybe 8 tons of waste per day. What a typical commodity plant would call a byproduct. Guts, bones, digestive tracts, reproductive tracts, respiratory tracts. that are not marketable for human consumption. And so we compost it. We, make a lasagna of carbaceous material with that really nutrient dense byproduct. And in a year or two, it's really great organic soil amendment to increase the organic matter in our soil. But what does not compost well is fat. Fat forms an impermeable layer that doesn't allow rainwater to penetrate or vegetation, to grow. And so it was less about wanting to be in a vertical and more about dealing with a problem and making a negative a positive. In terms of compost, fat's a negative, but fat's really not a negative. Today, tallow is one of the most sought after products that we sell. We're currently making the decision: do we want to keep making candles, or do we need to produce a fattier ground beef, because they're pulling from the same ingredients. So I think that farms can't really focus on wanting to be in a vertical, but dealing with what you've got.
Makes a lot of sense. And yeah, I think that's an interesting question right now. Tallow is so hot right now, to quote Zoolander. But I think it's an interesting problem to have. Like we've got, 5 or 6 different tallow products. Where should we be utilizing our tallow? And in my mind, like the skincare line, or, maybe B2B as a fat is the right play. I think that you might get a higher premium there. So interesting problems to have. And to your point, good on you all for identifying those problems and turning them into commercial value.
When we discovered that fat didn't compost well, we spent a bunch of money for a
biodiesel converter.
Biodiesel converter, and I'll give it to you if you want it.
Do I have to come pick it up, or will you ship it?
I'll probably ship it.
Wow.
I really couldn't. It never worked very well, but we weren't trying to save money on diesel. We were trying to get rid of that fat that now we run out of. It's incredible.
I would love to hear y'all talk about working with other brands. That has evolved over time, right? Sounds like commodity into kind of everything was White Oak branded. I know you've worked with some other brands. I don't know what the current status of that is, but can you talk about that journey and where you think that's going?
For us, there was a time where we needed for other brands to help us turn trim or ground beef into a snack bar or into a jerky.
Right.
Post-COVID, we've been really blessed to be able to take a lot of that volume and sell it as White Oak Pastures branded products. So we work with fewer other brands today than we have ever in the past. Now, there are still, really great ones out there. Fond Broth is buying some fat from us and some bones. We've worked with, Figure 8 Foods, for some biltong jerky. There are really good people out there, but, for us, part of our brand growth was being able to mature and sell it under our brand and not someone else's.
Jenni, when you came back to the business, how much of the things that we've just listed off here recently existed, and how much has just been since you rejoined the business?
When I came back to the business, we only had the red meat processing plant. There was not the poultry plant, none of the ancillaries, the garden. I'm not responsible for introducing all that. That's not saying that when I came back, all that other shit started to happen. That is literally not. I'm the one blessed enough to be in a position to talk to y'all today to represent that hard work that's happened, but that was not me. I talk a lot about when I came back, the business did not need me. I needed the business. Dad's rule was that you have to work off the farm for a year before you return back to work for your daddy. And so I did my 365 days off the farm and came back, and the business was profitable. I couldn't cut meat. I wasn't Will Harris. I suck at accounting. Graphic design's not my thing. Not a great writer. Really didn't have many skills. And so I was really blessed to have a dad who allowed me to be an apprentice. I'm not a lot of things, but in that list is also lazy. I came to work every single day. And if he came in at 5, I was here at 5. If he didn't leave until 8, hell, I left at 8. It's fine. But it was a great opportunity for me. Not that I was doing White Oak Pastures any favors, but I was doing myself the favor of being Will Harris's apprentice. And he allowed me to draw a paycheck to do that for a couple of years, honestly, a couple of years before I, really formed what is my contribution, which is, the website and direct-to-consumer marketing. That's what I love. I love our wholesale partners. They do a great job for us. They serve a really great need. But the fun and all the levers, of triggering off things and call to actions and watching things happen exist in that direct-to-consumer marketing.
Yeah, Jenni's a little hard on herself with that explanation.
Yeah.
The fact is that when I ran this as just a cattle farm, there was one decision maker on the farm, and that was me. And I had 3 or 4, whatever, minimum wage employees that did what I told them to do. And that was fine. I didn't need any management help. As I grew the business, we added more and more and more components to it, more aspects, and I needed some management, and I wasn't very good at delegating that and bringing in other people. So and so it reached a point I was managing people all day long and not seeing about my business. And we started a little bit before she got here. We started adding a little bit of complexity to it, and having managers and people working for people that wasn't Will. And by the time she got here, I had a need for more of those people. And then, of course, she was 20-something years old, young, and she had to learn some stuff. So she's been hard on herself, but she was contributory from day one. But she had to learn how to manage people. And today we've got 6 or 7 directors. I'm one, Jenni's one, other family members and non-family members are directors that manage about 20 managers that manage about 150 or whatever's left employees.
Wow.
So we've got a lot of structure, but we had to go from one guy to what we do now, and it was a little painful. And Jenni was very, and she's not the only one, but she's one of the people that was very instrumental and influential in getting that done.
Well, if there's anything I'm learning about the Harris family on today's podcast, both of you, as Jenni's telling her humble story of learning how to contribute, Will's sitting there shaking his head like, no, that's not true. And as Will's talking about Jenni's contributions from day one, she's sitting there shaking her head like, no, that's not true. So humility for the self seems evident, and the ability to see value in others seems evident. So I think those are both fantastic qualities to have, and appreciate you just seeing that and observing that in the podcast has been fun.
Pride goes before the fall.
No doubt.
Yeah.
Well, you've mentioned the land management piece a few times, and I want to kind of double click into the agronomy of what's happening on the farm. And I am not a farmer. I know next to nothing about farming. I'm lucky to be on this podcast to try to learn out loud from people like you. Help me understand, how many animals rotate on the same piece of land? Does it start with cattle for X period of time, then it goes to sheep, then it goes to poultry? What does the rotation look like, and why is there a specific order of how it works?
There's a lot of complexity. That's a good question. There's a lot of complexity to it. So this farm that we're sitting on here is 3,200 acres. Wow. And it's divided up into about 150 or so 30-ish acre paddocks. And it was predominantly a cow farm. It's exclusively a cow farm for many years, and that's still predominantly a cow farm. But we have basically 3 herds of cattle: a winter calving herd, a summer calving herd, and a finishing herd. That's not exactly true. There's some little variations from that, but that's basically the way it works. And generally, every herd gets moved to another paddock every single day. So a paddock is grazed about every 50 days, roughly. and it's grazed for one day, and then the animals are moved, and it'll be 50 days before they come back.
Specifically cattle.
Specifically cattle, that's what we're talking about. Good point. Good point. That's cattle. When I first started, I'm a cow guy. So when I first started adding other species, I tried to make them fit that cattle model.
Yeah.
It didn't work. You know how you've heard of cattle drives from Mexico to Canada?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You never heard of a chicken drive from Mexico to Canada?
Have not.
And that's because it doesn't work. And I tried to make it work, and I just about ran off all the good help I had,
including me,
trying to make it work. And I finally saw that it don't work. So now that the other species are moved, and they're moved regularly, but it's got to fit the species. They just don't move as quickly and as far and as fast. So every species moves. We don't overgraze any area, whether it's chickens don't graze, whether it's chickens or hogs or cows or sheep, and it's very, very prescriptive. We put the animals where they're needed. I can take you right now to places that need a hog impact, or they need a goat impact, or they need a poultry impact, and then there's a certain amount of education and learning when they need what. But it's that's the way it's done.
It almost brings me back to the lawnmower analogy before, like seeing what is growing in a specific area and prescribing the right animal for that paddock. To drill down a little bit further, like so what does needing hog impact look like, and what does a hog do differently than a cow or a sheep or a chicken?
Hogs are forest creatures. Goats are forest creatures. Hogs root. We don't put rings in their nose. We leave it so that they're free to root. They disturb the soil, and a certain level of soil disturbance is really good for the ecosystem. Too much soil disturbance destroys the ecosystem. And knowing when it's needed and when it's enough is just
all art, no science.
All art, no science. Yeah, well said.
Yeah. Well, y'all are certainly doing some things right, because I've been there, and the hogs looked very happy to me, and you moved God knows however many cattle when I watched, and they seemed like they were having a pretty damn good time as well.
If you come here tonight and spend the night, you can see it again in the morning.
There you go. I don't know how I could get there by tonight from California, but I am due for a return visit. I will say that.
You're welcome.
Day after tomorrow and the day after that, we're going to do it again. So you'll be all right.
Yeah. Will, you mentioned that finishing the cows was a challenge when you made the transition early on. What has allowed you to improve there? And has there been big forage or genetic changes or components that have, helped you out with that?
That's a really good question. And the answer is yes. Yes, there have been forage improvements. Yes, there have been genetic improvements. There have been educational improvements on our part, knowing what to do. There's been some and also been some adjusting of attitudes about what to expect. If you've been in if your experience with beef consumption has just been choice or prime, that's what you ate. Ruth's Chris Steakhouse. That's just what you don't do that with grass-fed beef. It's a different expectation. And I've heard other cattlemen say, my beef is as tender as any choice or prime beef you've ever had. No, and no, it's not. No, it's not. I mean, it's just not. It's great. It's good.
Yeah.
So that comes from that beef comes from an obese creature that would never survive in nature. Would never live a normal life expectancy in nature. But that's what we've gotten used to eating since World War II, and it's good. I mean, it's good. I eat it, but it's not good for you, and it's not good. It's certainly not good for the animal. So it's a little different expectation. You know, I think that if there was a ground beef contest, you know, our beef would do really well. You know, if there's a middle meat contest, you know, filet's a little different.
New York strip.
New York strip. You know, it's not going to be as tender, and we try to prepare people for that. We tell them it's a different product. It's not the same. Yeah. It's good.
If it was a beauty pageant, we wouldn't win the prettiest girl in the contest. We'd win most well-rounded.
Yeah.
Really great personality.
Well, I've seen the instructions and the recipes that Jenni, that you and your team have put out, like via the email newsletter and stuff. So y'all are doing the right thing by, I think, trying to let people know, hey, this is what it is. This is how you should prepare it, etc. I'm sure that's been well received to some degree, right?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, it takes us, 3 years to grow a cow, and you know, a lot of prayer and chants for FedEx or UPS to deliver it correctly in the right amount of time to somebody's door, and then they unpack the box and innocently can ruin it in 30 seconds. You know, and so what we found out is that, you know, it is our job to grow it and to process it and to get it into a distribution model that, you know, can deliver it. But hell, once you get inside your house, I can't help you. You know, I can't fix it from there. You know, and so those have for the customers who are receptive and want to learn and want to participate, it's great. If it's somebody who has already made up their mind that they're the best damn cook on the face of the planet and they can't do anything wrong, you know, it don't matter what we put out, it won't work. So
Fair deal. Well, Will, I really like what you said about choice and prime being obese animals, and I think it's indicative of how backwards the food system is in the United States, that people are willing to pay a premium for the least healthy animal and the least healthy for themselves and the least healthy for the land, right? So commend you all for the efforts you're making to try to reverse that system. I think it's really important. I also want to kind of dig into it. When you all describe the operation, it seems really complex. It seems really difficult, but it also seems highly, I don't know what the right word is. Like, there's a level of pride that you take in the operation that you all have. And I'm curious, from like your neighbor farms and other farmers who may not even be neighbors, like, why aren't more people doing this? What is so hard about it? Why can't we get more people to adopt these practices?
That's a good question. And, you know, the fact is, so it's probably more than you want to know, but we got about $30 million in assets at White Oak Pastures, about $10 million in debt. And then the business will may make $1 million a year. It may not. That's a very low return on investment and a very low return on equity. But it's what we want to do, and we think it's the right thing to do. And we're not doing it for others. We're doing it for ourselves. This is what we want to do. In a conventional farming operation, so many of the costs are thrown off for others to bear. And this is important. You know, we're about 80 miles from the Gulf of Mexico. And there's a dead zone in the Gulf of Mexico that used to be a flourishing oyster ground. Right. It's a dead zone now.
It's the size of Massachusetts. It's not a little one.
It's as big as the state of Massachusetts.
Yeah. It's a big dead zone.
Big dead zone. And we killed it by chemical fertilizers and pesticides, washing down Spring Creek to the Chattahoochee River to Apalachicola Bay, and destroying that ecosystem. But the pesticide companies and the fertilizer companies and the farmers that are responsible for that won't pay to fix it. We all pay to fix it. It's a decentralized cost. I think a lot about endangered species of plants and animals and microbes. I think that in an ecosystem, every being in that ecosystem has a role, plant, animal, or microbe. And we have driven so many species into extinction or near extinction, and that has and we did it through farming with chemical fertilizers, pesticides, and tillage, and that has a cost.
Right.
But the farmer, nor the chemical fertilizer manufacturer, nor the pesticide manufacturer covers that cost. We all cover it. Climate change, on and on. We can spend the day, plastics in the environment, all these things that we put out there, that the cost doesn't fall on the perpetrator, it falls on greater society. So no wonder they sell cheap shit. We're all paying the costs.
Right.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. Well, and I'll just add another piece to that. It was very hard to make these transitions. The cost of the transition was tremendous. Dad was very fortunate to have inherited a very nice farm, big farm. He's an only child, 1,000 acres, a nice herd of cattle. Let's also remember that even if they had the desire to make the transition, it's very expensive. It takes, the textbook says 1 to 3 years to turn a business profitable. There are not very many people who have the opportunity to lose money for 6 months, let alone 3 years. And it's very expensive. It's not just the lost revenue, it's increased cost. So chomping at the bit to not make a ton of money, to spend a lot of money, and maybe lose everything along the way, it's hard. There's not very many people that want to sign up for that. And I don't know that I blame them.
And this is a purely agrarian economy. Where we're sitting in this county, there's never been a railroad, never been a
manufacturing mill.
Yes, it's a purely agrarian economy. And these people make money in the industrial farming model, and they believe that they learn from their father and grandfather about industrial farming. They learn at the University of Georgia or in whatever land grant university. It's about the industrial farming. The county agent, Department of Agriculture, is about industrial farming. I go on and on about respected institutions that promote industrial farming. So nobody feels like they're doing anything wrong.
Right.
These people, these industrial farmers around here, my friends and neighbors and relatives, are good people. They are wonderful people. And they don't think they're doing anything wrong. I think they are. They don't think so. And, I can get in some serious arguments with them about that. We don't talk about it because they don't want to argue with me. I don't want to argue
Right. Some
with
families
them.
don't talk politics. Your family doesn't talk regenerative versus industrial ag. That's the off the limits.
We shouldn't. Sometimes it slips out.
Of course.
But it's hard to transition. It's very, very hard to transition. Had I not done it when I did, I don't know if I could have done it or not. Had I not had a paid for farm, I don't know if I could have done it or not. I can go on and on.
Well, I really appreciate that perspective. Yeah. And again, as somebody who is not a farmer and does not understand the myriad of challenges it takes to transition, this is good education for me. And I also really want to pick both of your brains about what sort of incentive structures in your minds could change to help make that transition less risky, easier, more appealing to the farmers who are currently not participating in these programs.
If we see a significant change in the way we produce food in this country, if we do, it's going to be consumer driven. It won't happen without consumers driving it. I told you it's very difficult and expensive and risky for the farmer to do it, so the consumer's got to do it. Big food companies are not going to benefit. If it happens, it's going to be consumer driven. And I worry about it. I feel like I've vacillated through the years. I told you I started making this transition because I wanted to, because I didn't like what I was doing, and transitioned to this. And then people started talking about regenerative agriculture. And I can remember going through a period of time, I said, I am what they call an early innovator. And what I'm doing, more and more people are going to do, and I think that's great. We don't aspire to make this the biggest company we can make it. We're probably as big as or bigger than we need to be now. So we're not trying to grow the company. So we aspire. We support other people that want to do this. And then I've gone through this. Maybe I'm not an early innovator because it's hard. People aren't doing it. Maybe I'm just a niche marketer, and that's okay. I like early innovator better, but niche marketer is okay. But we're gonna survive, and we probably are now. Currently, we sell our product in 48 states, and we don't want to. We want to sell our product as locally as we can. I can't do it in Bluffton, Georgia, but Georgia, Florida, Alabama, surely you can sell this much stuff in Georgia, Florida, Alabama, and leave it for people in the upper Midwest or New England or Pacific coast to do the same thing there. But it's just not happening very, very quickly, and I'm not sure it's going to happen at all. I hope it does.
It's an interesting segue into, I think, the other transition, the business transition, right? So we talked a little bit about the on-farm transition. We've talked about this shift you've all had more to the D2C side. Jenni, I would love to hear you kind of talk us through that journey and also talk us through some of the inflection points. It sounds like COVID was a big inflection point. It sounds like, increasing margin capture as some of the retailer margin eroded was an inflection point. It sounds like having this assortment that's grown, needing to sell that kind of in one basket to people is an inflection point. Just walk us through that if you don't mind.
Yeah, that's a complicated question. I don't exactly know how I'll answer it, but I'll start out by saying that, the website sales, e-commerce, has been a thing since like 2010, 11, 12. And we've had every iteration of it. Back when, the real early, people were with ZenCart. I don't know if y'all remember that, but I was a ZenCart girl. I mean, that was like really dating me. And instead of like fixed spec, 2 chops per pack or an 8-ounce steak, this steak was 8.56 ounces. This steak is 8.64 ounces. This steak was, and the invoice, you're literally typing in, those exact weights. I mean, that's how manual catch weight. I mean, it was just incredible. And we've really, moved light years ahead, and we were encouraged to do so because of the imported product that showed up in grocery stores in the 2015 or so, time frame. When Dad built the business, it was entirely wholesale, entirely grocery. And he had no interest for it being anything any different. In fact, I don't even know that you focused on there being a different type of model out there. But that changed. It worked really, really well up until about 2015 when mandatory country of origin labeling was removed from meat packaging. Right. So in 2015, you could be eating ground beef from an animal that was raised in Australia, slaughtered in Australia, shipped on a cargo ship, as meat, lean trim, and then ground in the United States, and that be marketed as a product of the USA. It's just like, the shirt I'm wearing, and I know, Anthony, you're wearing a shirt that is made with, I think, organic domestic cotton, right? Yep. So, yes. And I have some of those that you sent me. But, today, you can be eating product of the USA beef from an animal that never walked a step on American soil, drew a breath of American air, but that's a product of the USA. Now, that's supposedly going to change in January of next year. We'll see if that remains the case. But, for us, opportunity to sell direct to the end consumer was really invaluable, because we weren't going to have enough tallow candles to give to somebody, or rawhide pet shoes to allow a grocery store to sell. E-commerce for us was a place that you could get, the fig jam and strawberry jelly and, beef jerky and whatever else in these little tiny quantities that were very dynamic, and proportionate to the available raw material. It's like our organic vegetable farm is maybe 2 or 3 acres. Well, we have some okra, but it's not 2 acres of okra. It's just some okra. And that okra that we get, we pickle and we turn into pickled okra. But we don't get a couple hundred jars a year. And so there's really no wholesale model that can support that. So for us, that direct to consumer side of things was the answer. Did I answer that question?
Yeah, I think you did. I have a little story that into a question. I was back home in Indianapolis, Indiana over the holidays, and one of my little nephews is playing basketball, and one of the dads has a White Oak Pastures hat on. And so I go up there, I'm like, White Oak Pastures, blah, blah, blah. And he's like, I heard about them on Rogan, and we buy the meat once a month now. And we went down and stayed at one of the cabins in Bluffton. I'm like, awesome. Love that.
That's great. What a small world.
But tell him thank you. Tell him we said thank you.
I will. But I'm curious, and you guys don't need to share numbers or anything, but like, what has been the effect on the e-commerce business of being on Rogan twice?
Yeah, that's great. So, we didn't have e-commerce figured out, but we had figured some of the stuff about e-commerce out. So our e-commerce business is the product of being able to fail over and over and over again for years, and pandemic that happened in March of 2020. We did, just to share numbers, 2019, I think $2 million worth of revenue online, which hell, I was proud of. I thought that was just awesome. Yeah. And, March of 2020 rolls around, and it was like, the business tripled. It literally tripled overnight. So our ability to grow e-commerce was not because we're such shrewd marketers and because we're just so good at what we do and the brand is just that awesome. It was, literally a panicked pandemic situation where people were just trying to feed their families. And we happened to, have the ability to bypass traditional methods to get, products to people's homes. And so that was good. Dad went on Joe Rogan in November of 2022, and we made some huge mistakes from a marketing perspective that I got an opportunity to fix the next time. But the Rogan effect for us can be summed up to about 12 weeks of not being able to find your ass with both hands. I mean, it was incredible, and there was really no body or no way to prepare for it. I didn't know that it was possible to go through what we went through. It was a blessing, but it was we were extended a lot of grace during that period. So we finally caught our breath probably April or May, after that November airing of Dad going on, and that was a really powerful episode. I mean, it still gets a ton of of reference and a ton of activity. He was just really on his game and was laying down a lot of truth. And Joe was incredibly receptive and interested. It was just this perfect combination of huge platform and lots of experience. And it was a real blessing, not only for White Oak Pastures, but I think for, small regenerative farms and, all over.
100%.
Totally.
Yep.
And then we had the opportunity to go back on after his book was published. Book came out 10/10/23, and we went back on. He and I both went in November of 23. And we knew the mistakes we had made the prior year and fixed those entirely. I will say, I will brag on our marketing team and saying that we handled it that next go around.
There you go.
Had gotten a second bite at the apple, as we Southerners say, and we bit that son of a gun hard. So we use that as another opportunity to tell people about regenerative farming. So the effect is real.
I don't want to disappoint, but you're not going to have the Regen Brands effect to the same degree. We don't have quite that platform audience yet. But I do want to touch, obviously, Rogan Twice is fantastic. Love the support for the book launch. Want to dig into the book a little bit. Why did you all decide, Will, why did you decide to want to write a book? What were you wanting to say? What was that process like? And what sort of reception has the book received so far?
I didn't want to write a book.
Who forced you to write a book?
Her.
I should say we've been thrust in a lot of businesses we did not want to go in. Tourism was, a gift, but it was because there were a lot of curious people that showed up and said, come here and show me what you're doing. And being a nice, interested, passionate person, he'd drop what he was doing and show them. And then, we kind of formalized tours, and then we formalized overnight stays, and then we formalized our restaurant because, when you bring people out here and you keep them overnight, you got to have a place to feed them. There's not a whole lot of opportunity around here. So the book is just another iteration of being thrust into an opportunity.
So I got called by a couple from New York City who I now understand are agents for.
They're literary agents.
Yeah, for Penguin, Random House, Viking. And they proposed that I write a book, and I told them I can't write a book. I don't read books. I certainly can't write them. My education is the University of Georgia College of Agriculture. Writing a book was not part of that. But they were very insistent, and Jenni got involved, and the cunning plan became to hire a writer to write the book for me. And the writer, I wasn't too excited about that, but the writer wound up being a little sweetheart, just about Jenni's age. How about the same age?
Yeah.
Just a sweetheart. And I kind of fell in love with her, and she spent a lot of time down here. And we talked endlessly. And we had a date every Friday. And when she left here, went back to California, we had every Friday. She called, I'd call. We had a 1 to 3 hour call. She'd ask questions. She was like a drill sergeant. And in other words, she wrung everything out of me that I have ever known or thought I knew or wanted to know. And she wrote the book, and I think she just did a fantastic job. If it's good, it's because she did good. If it's bad, it's because I screwed it up.
There you go. I like it. Well, we will definitely link it in the show notes. Encourage everybody to check it out. It's on my bookshelf. I have not read it yet. Is there an audio version? Can I get it on Audible too?
Will Harris himself.
Oh, okay. That's what I need.
Amazing.
I need it in the voice of Will Harris, not my dumb brain trying to read it.
Well, they started sending samples of voices to read his book, and I was like, this is not going to work. This can't be the way the book goes. He'll never write another one. This cannot be it. Yeah. And so I had to really beg him. It's amazing what a man will do for his grandchildren. I said, Daddy, don't do it for me. Don't do it for you. Do it for your grandchildren. They need this. And he gave in.
To read the book, I had to go to Albany, about 50 miles away, to a recording studio every day for about 7 or 8 days. Supposed to be 5. Might be 7 or 8 days. Supposed to be 4 originally.
It was supposed to be 4, and it took him 8.
Yeah. And the reason is because
he's excessive. Remember?
Huh?
You're excessive, like you said earlier.
Excessively slow to speak, the draw.
Well, so the producer, director, whatever he was in New York City, he was an asshole. And I'd have me read, and I'd read it. He'd say, read it again. I read it again. And I read everything at least twice, maybe 3 times.
Wow.
Because he couldn't understand the way I speak.
And for those people, you should read the book.
That's right.
So
that sounds like a frustrating experience. Ooh. I can only imagine.
If he was in New York, I could have gotten my hands on it.
Would have been a faster process, I would imagine. I do want to talk about the title, A Bold Return to Giving a Damn. Why did you choose that title? Because I love it, and I just want to hear from you. Like, why was that important to you to use those words?
Well, it's just one of the things that we say. We have a lot of very Southern expressions that we use, and that's one of them. And they just chose it.
I think the book was slated to be called a simple business, a more simple business, and that was what the publisher, they were very nice. They were very easy to work with, but that was what they originally slated it for. And we said, no, what about like radically traditional farming? That's, we gave them just a list of things that we thought, were more us. And on the list was a bold return to giving a damn. And they were like, that's the one, let's go with that one. So that was not a confrontational thing. It just that their pick wasn't as good as ours.
Yeah. I like it.
I dig it. I have to know, like, can you give me like the top 3 other Southern phrases that are maybe the rest of the non-Southern world doesn't know? I need, just for my own, I need to hear these.
Yeah. A gnat's ass. So that's a pretty small thing. A gnat's ass is pretty small. You'd rather be beat with barbed wire.
I will have my ass with a piece of barbed wire.
I'd rather have my ass with, I said I keep my ass with both hands. That was, one that after you hear it, you're like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Let's see, what else?
Okay.
I'll email them to you.
Okay.
There's a list of funny things that he said that somebody started a long time ago through email, and I'll find it and email it to you. You can put it in the
show.
show.
Love that.
I wasn't trying to be funny. I wasn't trying to be funny.
Yeah.
That's why it's great, though.
Yeah. We definitely need that. Speaking of terms and phrases and all that, like, I'm really curious to hear you all talk about regenerative, this term. It's been mentioned a few times already. Like, when did that become part of the brand story? And where do you all see that going for your brand, but also like how it's being used at large in the marketplace? Like, what do you think about the state of the term?
Well, ever since I've been in this business, the industry has been taking terms away from us. It's USDA certified organic. You can grow tomatoes hydroponically in no soil, under lights, no sun, and it's a certified organic tomato. So organic became meaningless to me. What else? Sustainable.
Sustainable was taken away before anybody really knew what it meant.
Yeah.
I mean,
right.
And I think regenerative's going to have.
It'll go. There are people that make a lot of money taking phrases and the wordsmiths, and we can't compete with them. And I don't want to talk. I don't want to build this business based on the word regenerative. It is regenerative. We regenerate the cycles of nature that we talked about earlier. But it will be taken away from us. You just got to. We all want to make it so simple, and it can't be that damn simple. The consumer's got to know something about their farmer and the way he produces their food. If it's going to work, if it's going to persist.
In your opinion, how do we help to solve that problem? And I totally hear what you're saying, that these words get co-opted and lose their meaning. And I think you're right. I hope it doesn't happen for regenerative, but I think history tells a different story. But how do we still solve that problem? If it's not the term, how do we help people understand where their food is coming from and how their farmers are producing their food?
I think consumers got to meet their farmer. Now, I understand if you live in a high-rise condominium in New York City or LA or somewhere, it's difficult to get out and meet a farmer. I get that. But I didn't say anything about going to the farm. I think it's great if you can. But with social media being as inquiring and invasive as it is,
and free as it is,
it's invasive. But it's invasive in a good way, because if the farm has got much of a media presence, you can sit in your apartment in LA or New York and learn all you need to know about that farm to make a selection, to make that your choice. And if you don't like that one, look a little bit further. None of us are just alike. It's not a cookie cutter deal. Some of us may be better at the regenerative side. Some of us might be better at the animal welfare side. Some of us might be better at the rural economic recovery side. On and on, on and on. So find somebody you like. It's like dating. You can find your wife online. For sure you can find a damn partner online.
That should be a new slogan. This should be a campaign.
There you go.
That's it right there.
So, I do think that you got to do that. And the problem is Jenni talked about how we got our start in grocery. I'm grateful to those people. They got us started. But none of us farmers are big enough. None of us real, regenerative, sustainable, farmers are big enough to supply a grocery chain.
Mm-hmm.
So, and it's very difficult for them to say, well, we'll let Will do it in Atlanta, Georgia, and we're going to let John do it in Philadelphia, and. That
right.
falls apart, implodes.
Mm-hmm.
So, but it is possible for consumers to get online, and while they're dating their next wife, they can pick their next farmer and order the food.
I'll say another thing, information is easier to get today than it's ever been. I mean, look at y'all. Y'all
Right.
are, two professional people, interviewing, a farmer in Southwest Georgia. Y'all are clearly using your platform to make connections for people. I think, there are a lot of people that are interested in doing that. So I think that food systems are really participatory from lots of different areas, not just on us raising food. It's on the receptiveness of consumers, and the way information is shared by people like you between the two.
Mm-hmm.
We spend a lot of time. He specifically spends a lot of time doing just this, and it's because we understand that the food system can change if it changes with consumer preference.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, love that. I want to double back to the whole international versus domestic supply of grass-fed beef. I'm curious what you all see as the consumer responsibility here domestically to support the domestic producers. I feel like there is some, maybe it's hard to articulate what that is. The labeling policy is clearly ass backwards, and that's just common sense policy. It shouldn't be labeled as that. So hopefully that does go into effect, and that's a fix. But for the American consumer, what is the responsibility or the role to try and support the domestic producers?
Well, I think that sadly, most of the big beef companies do import their grass-fed beef, or some of their grass-fed beef. I won't say who unless you twist my tail, but Jenni was on a call.
You can tell the story.
I'll tell the story. I won't say who unless you twist my tail.
I'm not twisting his tail, so we're not saying who.
Yeah, we don't need to twist your tail.
We were selling grass-fed. We were selling some grass-fed beef to another national grass-fed beef company that they put under their label. We was just selling beef. Mm-hmm. And Jenni was doing an annual review online with them, teleconference like this. And they went through their little presentation and said that, they picked up this grocery company and that grocery company and whatever else. And they got down to the end, and it sounded great. They're just growing like gangbusters, which is good.
Yeah.
They got down to the end. They said, and our projections for next year, we're going to maintain the same volume every month. And that was fine with us. We're not trying to grow that business, but Jenni, being a businesswoman, said, well, that's fine, no problem. We'll continue to provide for you. But with all that growth you just told me about, where are you going to get it from? Because there's just not that many large grass-fed beef producers in the country.
Right.
And everybody got quiet. And Jenni's pretty good. She knows that if you ask a question and nobody answers it, just wait.
Yeah. Yeah.
So she did, and found one of them broke and said, okay, so we're importing some grass-fed beef, okay? And she said, well, I don't know if it's okay or not. And we cut them off. We cut them off. And it was a supplier that we've had an excellent relationship from a long time and are personally friends with the founders. But screw it. We're not going to be used to cover up something that's that divisive, and
you asked earlier about, selling product to other brands. It's just, for us, we've been burned. It's for that, it's not worth it. Would I love to continue to sell that amount of beef every month? Absolutely. That would have made my job a lot more simple. But philosophically, it just was not where we thought we aligned. Their business changed, and that's fine. They deserve the latitude to change the business, but we deserve the latitude to decide if we want to participate.
And the customer deserves to be told. The customer deserves to be told.
And this, I wanted to double check on the issue.
So we cut them off, but we still had cows in the pasture that were going to have a slaughter date scheduled. So Jenny had to really scramble to find a place to go with that beef that we previously been depending on them to sell for us. But we're not going to help them. We're not going to help them camouflage.
Yeah.
Yeah, the camouflage aspect, it's really the fact that foreign beef is coming in labeled as a USA product. That's the big issue that you all have, and you don't want to be a part of that, correct? Yeah, and that makes sense. I at first I was thinking, do you all just not want to see beef imported into the United States? And again, that doesn't seem like it's the issue. It's you don't feel like it's correct to label it as a USA product.
Imports erode the opportunity for domestic producers. Dad talks a lot about, look at the sheep industry. The sheep industry's basically gone because of imports, and cattle are now following the same suit. We're kind of at a fork in the road with domestic cattle production, and this year, or 2024, so last year was the first year that marked us importing more pounds of beef than we exported. We don't want to participate in that. We think that there needs to be more domestic cattle production. We think that the ability for American farmers to feed American consumers is a pretty big deal.
And we don't, our claim is not that imported grass-fed beef is inferior. I'm not saying it's not good. I hadn't been to look and see. I don't know. I assume it's fine. But it's not a product of the USA. Just say it out loud. Why would you say product of the USA? But prior to that change, Department of Ag change, product of the USA meant born, raised, and processed in the 50 states. And as Jenny pointed out, if value is added, you call it product of the USA. But that's just intentionally misleading.
It's like totally agree. This shirt, sewn, grown, put together in a lot of different, in Taiwan or whatever. And then we bring it in and we sew that button on it, or maybe even just put it from a bulk bag into this shirt having its own individual bag. And then this shirt becomes a product of the USA.
Yeah, very misleading to say the least. I had another question queued up and I completely lost my train of thought. And I'm so bummed because it was going to be a really good question, but it's gone.
I can interject with something as you think about what it was.
I knew you'd come up with a good question if we kept at this long enough.
I just need about an hour to warm up, Will. You got to give me some time. I'm a slow starter. I'm like a biodiesel converter or something like that,
I'll share a story, and then I have a question that'll follow. That's a different.
Hold on, my question came back. I'm sorry.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so Jenny, you mentioned that great stat about we imported more beef than we produced in the United States for the first time. My assumption is that is because of the demand for 100% grass-fed, grass-finished is increasing, and most of what we're importing is grass-fed, grass-finished. Now, again, that's a complete assumption. Is that true? Is that not true?
No. It's just pounds of beef in versus pounds of beef out.
Yeah.
Dollars worth in.
It's import versus export, not produced.
And it's not just grass-fed. Okay. I'm not talking about the grass-fed category. I'm talking about beef at large. What America produces is largely 50-50 trim, and 50-50 trim is not a marketable product. So we have to import pounds of lean trimming to then create an 80-20, 90-10 ground beef product. So what the commodity cattle production CAFO system produces is not what consumers can purchase.
I did not know that, so I'm so glad I asked what actually now seems to be maybe not a great question, but I got a great answer out of it, so thank you.
Yeah.
Dad's got a blog coming out in the next day or two about it, so stay tuned.
There we go. I
Cool.
like it.
We'll include that in the show notes as well.
That tees up something I would like y'all to highlight and just educate folks on as well, which is two things that y'all work on. One is CFAR, which I believe is a educational nonprofit that you all run. And then the other one is the internship program. And I'll just tell a real quick story, then let y'all handle the rest. But when I was getting my start in this space, no idea, couldn't find my ass with my two hands myself. I was trying to learn as much as I could. And I sent Jenni an email about a workshop that White Oak was hosting where Gabe Brown and Will were going to speak. And I forget what it cost, but it was something I couldn't afford. And I asked Jenni, I said, hey, Jenni, can I come? I'm going to be driving through town. I'm driving my grandpa's car up from Pensacola to Indiana. No problem. Absolutely come. And it was really a magical day with you two, with Gabe, with all the interns that were there, with a few farmers and ranchers that showed up to learn. So I'm just deeply grateful because it really was very impactful to me at a very important time in my kind of journey trying to support this space in the way that I do now. But I also think it shows you all have plenty going on. So you could definitely kind of shut the doors, put walls up and say, hey, we're just going to do our thing and we don't need to really share this with the world. But you've really taken a turn to do just the exact opposite of that. So I'd love to hear you just speak about that, why in those two programs specifically.
Yeah, I think that, Dad mentioned earlier, and we all really, really don't want to grow the business. I'm a wife, I'm a mother of two, I'm a daughter. White Oak Pastures is very important to me, but I'm also important to other people. And,
right.
I can't put in another 10 hours to do $100,000 more of sales, or another 20 hours to do 2 million more in sales. I don't want that for me. I don't want that for my family. I'm very satisfied with my quality of life. So there is really no temptation to grow the business. We are very, very happy. It's as complicated as our feeble minds can stand to run it. If it gets much harder or much bigger, we probably have to hire somebody, an executive, something, to help us run the business. And we really don't want that. And in that sort of journey and coming to accept that we don't want to grow the business, we want to just continue the business. We want to continue to do what we're doing. We focused on the fact that regenerative agriculture is not very scalable. It is very replicatable. No farmer will ever be able to write a how-to manual or a hot list of things to do, or tell somebody exactly how it should be done, because you could take him, the best, in my opinion, cattle person on the face of the planet, and move him a few hundred miles in any direction, and he's all of a sudden, as lost as anybody. It's that regional. And so for us, education became a huge thing, because we now are focused on the fact that we're not scalable, and probably anybody operating a business like this is not scalable. We've done scalable food before, and that's the commodity food production system. So we've got to help this system replicate, all over the United States of America and the world. But the formation of CFAR, which is the 501c3, was Dad's hope to invest in education, to give foundations, to give corporations the opportunity to donate, to see this movement replicated in other parts of the United States. So we have educational sessions, probably one every month, that range between pastured production, to the fundamentals of regenerative agriculture, to something very niche to us, but also to others, solar grazing. And we rotate those, individual classes through the year, and host people at White Oak Pastures to help, not tell them what to do, but show them what we did, so that, they'll be inspired and go home and take the things that worked for us, take the things that didn't work for us, and retool it and make it work for them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The internship program, you have anything you want to add about CFAR?
No,
the internship program was another one of those things that we were thrust into. Probably, I don't know, 15 years ago, Dad, got emails from people all over the world that said, "Hey, I'm willing to donate my time if you'll just let me come learn." And, he said, I reserve the right to fire you if you're lazy, and promote you. I don't want you to, I don't know who you are. Your time is not something that's marketable to me. I need folks to know what they're doing.
Yeah.
And so, and also from a liability perspective, we couldn't just have like random people running around, doing what they do, which is still the case today. So he formed the internship program. It first started with just the organic vegetable farm, but has morphed. And probably for the last 8 years, we've had 4 sessions of interns every year, 12-week sessions, so 48 weeks out of the year, people here. And we're unfortunately in a housing crisis in Bluffton, Georgia. There's not very many people here. There haven't been a ton of people here, so the infrastructure is very small and limiting. And fortunately and unfortunately, more people want to come here than we can house. So we choose 6 applications, every semester, every 12-week period, and they're here rotating from sheep production to hog production to cattle production to honey to tallow, skincare production to, whatever. They vacillate and move through in a very systematic rotation. At the end of 12 weeks, if they like us and we have got a spot for them, we'll offer them a job at White Oak Pastures. And I'm fortunate to say that a lot of the managers I work most closely with are products of our internship program. They came here and rotated through and, have stayed 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years later.
Hell yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah, a few of those interns are some of my very good close personal friends in the space, and just really cool. So I appreciate y'all's leadership in a lot of regards, but that especially because, like you said, we have to spread this from a replicable model perspective because it can't necessarily scale past a certain point in a lot of places. Well, we'll take you home with the final question, which I feel like I say this every show now, but we've been kind of talking about it the whole episode. We ask everybody that comes on this one. How do we get Regen brands to have 50% market share by 2050? How do we do that?
Consumer education.
Yeah, I think you continue to use your platform to make what we do accessible for people that will never have the opportunity to know us, and us not have the opportunity to know them. I think you're doing what can be done, but ultimately it lies with the consumer.
Yep.
Appreciate that.
Well, we super appreciate the time. I think AC's right. We've been talking about it the whole time. And well, you've mentioned consumer education a handful of times, which is, I think, spot on with our theory of change. I also just want to circle back, talk about the regional system that you mentioned before and how you all don't want to sell product across the country. I think that's so admirable. And that ties into, Jenny, what you said about, it's a replicable system, not a scalable system. And the way I see the hopeful potential future of regenerative ag is there are other White Oak type operations that pop up in these different regions. And hopefully we get consumers to understand the benefits that these sorts of decisions have on their backyard. And we get to tie the ecosystem benefits to people's home turf, and that incentivizes more purchase. I don't know exactly how we increase household penetration regionally, but to me, this feels like part of the answer, so that consumer education piece and telling people like, hey, this is not just good for you, but it's good for your area that you live in. So,
the temptation is always there for me to start naming people that I know that I think are real good, that I respect. And I hate doing that because I always forget somebody and somebody's pissed off because I mentioned somebody and didn't mention them. But, there aren't enough of us out there, but there are a lot of us out there.
Yeah.
And if consumers will support the ones of us that are out there, it'll encourage others to step up. And I can just see it. I can see it growing if it could be that way. And as we said earlier, the obstruction of that is the fact that industrial food is so good at messaging what they're doing and confusing the consumer. And that happens all the time. Consumers are so busy, that and the messaging is so good.
Yeah. Well, if I don't want to give you any homework, but and you don't have to say it here on the podcast, but if you can come up with a list that we can share in the show notes of the other producers across the country, we would love to share that. But no pressure.
I think a lot of them are on episodes 0 to 96. So I think we have some of the bases covered already. But yeah, man, it's been a joy to have you both on. I for the longest time, because I'm in charge of scheduling, didn't feel worthy of asking you all to come on. So was kind of holding out until I felt like we were ready. And just really appreciate it.
Ridiculous. I'm sorry you were so wrong.
She's right. You're so wrong. We're delighted. We're delighted to talk about what we do.
Love it. Well, we appreciate y'all very much. So thank you for the time.
Thank y'all.
For transcripts, show notes, and more information on this episode, check out our website, regen-brands.com. That is regen-brands.com. You can also check out our YouTube channel, Regen Brands, for all of our episodes with both video and audio. The best way to support our work is to give us a 5-star rating on your favorite podcast platform and subscribe to future episodes on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. You can also subscribe to our newsletter, the Regen Brands Weekly, and follow our Regen Brands LinkedIn page to stay in the know on all the latest news, insights, and perspectives from the world of regenerative CPG. Thanks so much for tuning into the Regen Brands podcast. We hope you learned something new in this episode, and it empowers you to use your voice, your time, your talent, and your dollars to help us build a better and more regenerative food system. Love you guys.